New cabinet will be announced at 8 o'clock tonight, and already there's been something of a delay, and we've seen lots of moves in the rand. So let's bring that up. Let's look at the rand ahead of the much anticipated announcement. Now the rand, you can see behind me, slumped to a 7-month low yesterday, and it's plunged even further today. Now it looks like it's going up, but remember that a higher rand value to the dollar means a weaker rand. Some have attributed this to the unexpected delay in the appointment of the cabinet. We were, remember, expecting an announcement initially around Monday after President Cyril Ramaphosa was inaugurated last Saturday. Some say it could be the fact that David Mabuza was sworn in as an MP yesterday, paving the way for him to be reappointed as Deputy President of the country. Mabuza has been linked, of course, to scandals when he was the Premier of Mpumalanga, but he's denied wrongdoing. The rand fell by more than 2%, trading at around 14.70 to the dollar by the close of business yesterday. That's where we are about now, but it was much weaker earlier, hitting above 14.88 or thereabouts against the dollar. So this rand, as you can see, has been pretty volatile and pretty weak over the last day or two. And again, a higher value means against the dollar means a weaker rand, because more rand needed to buy $1. Let's bring in our guests. I'm going to speak to Nganti Pai. He's from Nascent, and Owen Nkomo, CIO at Nkunzi Wealth Group. Also for a global investor reaction on the line, we have Razia Khan, Chief Economist for Africa, Standard Chartered Bank in London. Razia, let me start with you. What will you be looking for tonight at 8? Is it all about the size of this cabinet or about the reputation of the members?
Well, market expectations have already been built up. There is an expectation amongst investors that because of the cost of governance in South Africa, we are going to see a more streamlined cabinet with a lot of the deputy minister positions potentially going. There is also an expectation that we will see a merging of some portfolios, so anything that delivers on that will likely be treated as a positive. Much more significant, however, is the expectation that we might see key reformists in the economic portfolio roles that really matter, anything that creates confidence that this is now about the pursuit of structural reforms in South Africa, that there are indeed challenges, but there is a plan in place to try to tackle those challenges head on. That would receive a more positive reception from markets.
How much of the nuances are international investors worried about, Razia? Because there are a lot of global investors in the rand. Do they look at specific names and the composition of this cabinet?
They do follow South African political developments very closely, and the familiarity with specific names is always a very interesting point to pick up on. So one of the key portfolios that will, of course, be looked to, given the current challenges, is that of the finance minister. They will be watching to see whether there is any continuity in public enterprises. Do recent developments, in particular what the public protector said on Friday, will that impact on the cabinet appointments in any meaningful way? There are a number of things that global investors are going to be watching very closely.
Tito Mboweni, is he the man to continue in that portfolio?
This is generally the expectation that many investors have. They see Mboweni as someone particularly closely associated. His time at the finance ministry, the bailout package for Eskom, the likelihood that Eskom will need more support. What form is that going to take? Who can credibly oversee that process? So this is something that will be watched very closely indeed.
Razia, please stay with us. Let me come to the two gentlemen in studio with me. Owen, let's start with you. Do you agree that international investors are involved in the nitty-gritty here? They know the likes of names of Batabile Dlamini?
No, definitely. They definitely.
Maybe yes.
No, definitely they know about Batabile Dlamini and a whole lot of other ministers out there. But you'll be surprised, Francis. International investors are very savvy when it comes to emerging markets investment politics. They are very clued up. they know exactly what's going on. And in some cases, they know more than you and I do, because it serves them well to understand the dynamics of developing economies, because they are deploying billions and billions of dollars into these emerging markets. So the political environment is important to them, and so too is this decision coming through at 8 p.m. tonight. Let's look at what has already happened to the rand. So yesterday we saw that weakness. Was that possibly about David Mabuza? There are millions of transactions, but
Sure.
was it about him?
Look, I mean, it's very difficult to believe that it was. I think a lot of people, have known David Mabuza for a long time, right? He's not known to be a guy who actually shakes up anything. We've known him for over a year as deputy president. Nobody can say, well, he's that guy who was involved in this kind of transaction or that kind of policy. So it's been a relatively quiet.
He's kept a low profile.
Exactly. I don't think anybody, and especially because also he did say he was postponing this. So he's kept everybody sort of guessing. So I don't think that there was anybody who actually would have expected that he would completely be kept away. I think, if anything, it might have been a positive if he didn't come back, rather than a negative that he actually came back.
Well, I think that has been the concern. If you have someone with claims hanging over their head and they're a deputy president, they could move up if Ramaphosa steps down. Do you think that position will be interesting and important tonight?
Looks an interesting position to watch, but I just want to confirm that yesterday there was $2 billion that went through in trading because of the reweighting in the MSCI that happened in emerging markets currencies, particularly in South Africa. $2 billion of trades was partly why we saw the rand weakening this much. And, today I think there's a continuation of some cleanup trades that was going on. And I highly doubt that the fact that David Mabuza is back in the fray of things is the reason why the currency has weakened. In fact, I think the people I've been speaking to today, they are more positive about South Africa's future post the inauguration of President Ramaphosa on Saturday.
That. So there was this weakness, and we all think it's local politics, but there's also a lot of international stuff going on. So you're saying it's international.
Just look at the emerging markets currencies. If you pull up the graphs of the emerging markets currencies, pull out the Brazilian lira, the Turkish lira, the real rather from Brazil, and the Turkish lira and the Russian ruble, you'll find out that they also have a similar pattern of weakness. So I highly doubt that. It's 3 working days into the week after the president was announced. That's hardly a delay in my view.
Razia, if you're on the line, do you agree with that we are actually part of the emerging market story, South Africa at the moment?
Well, agreed. It's always very difficult to pinpoint the exact reasons behind a currency's move, and I think what happened this week is clearly an illustration of that. If there were a broad theme that we could pick out here, it's that a lot of investors are looking at South Africa, looking at the very idiosyncratic qualities of that particular market and thinking, yes, there is global risk aversion to some extent. There is concern around the impact of escalating trade tensions, where this eventually takes the global outlook. But at the same time, what gives a certain amount of perhaps reassurance is the idea that maybe South Africa is in sight of a more structural turning point. Full-on expectations that when the growth numbers are released, this will likely confirm a contraction in the first quarter, but maybe this is the point where things start to move in a more positive direction.
Yeah.
So many investors are taking that view, and we think that may well set the theme for how the rand performs against other currencies for the rest of this year. Of course, there are still considerable rating risks to be navigated.
Okay, so that sounds pretty positive. What are you actually expecting later tonight?
Look, I think what is going to be really important for the president is actually to communicate, because I suspect there are going to be a number of new names, right? People that are not known in the market. So that will be important for him to explain why there's certain names that are appearing, so that actually there's a little bit of information before we hit the markets tomorrow morning. I think that another thing, of course, is that he has to continue along this reformist agenda, so it's very difficult to see that, a guy like Tito Mboweni doesn't come back, because of course it's about continuation as well, continuity.
So the markets want Tito Mboweni to come back?
Certainly, because it's about also continuing some of the work that has started. Remember, Cyril Ramaphosa is not a new president. When he actually brought in our cabinet last time, when he started out last year at the beginning of the year, he certainly brought in names that he sort of introduced as people that can work with him to do some of this work. I think it's still very important for him to continue in some way trying to sort of say, look, we have started some work in these areas. I think what's of course said is all the controversy around the Minister of Public Enterprises, because that sort of destabilizes things a bit in terms of some of the work that has been going on, especially because also in this week, last week we saw the resignation of the CEO of ESCOM. So some of these things are going to be quite important. I think whatever he signals will be quite important in terms of not just saying, I'm naming these people, but this is the reason, this is the mix of the team, this is what I'm trying to get at, outside just the words, I'm reforming, I'm taking out people with bad names. And
ESCOM is our biggest financial risk, so public enterprise is important. And do you agree Tito Mboweni will be RAND positive?
No, look, I think one thing I can say is that even if Tito Mboweni doesn't come back, the country has got a lot of candidates, in my view, that could just take over that position. The National Treasury, the department has got a lot of good candidates who've been in that department for a long time, who could step up and fill those boots that Tito Mboweni has actually been wearing. For example, one could look at the current governor of the Reserve Bank as an example. That's someone that the president could have a look at. And there's a few other people. Maybe you could go back and look at the guys who left during President Zuma's leadership as well. So I'm not worried about who takes over the department. All I'm worried about is the continuation and the continuation of the message that says austerity measures are really coming, and we need to see real austerity measures. We need to see a smaller cabinet coming through. It doesn't help us to have more than 30 ministries when we have got such tight financial metrics, such as tight financial metrics in the country. We need to reduce the cabinet and have it be more effective. We need to attract more foreign direct investment into the country, and I think we need people that are accountable. Let's get some young people, who have got experience in international markets and, in whatever sphere they will be appointed to. That will at least start to, help the president achieve some of his goals. Let's not go back to the old guys. Let's let them go and farm somewhere.
Especially in communications, where we need to go digital and things like that. Let me throw the last question at you. So continuity important, and will we all be looking at whether Cyril Ramaphosa as president is sort of kowtowing to a different faction, or showing his muscle, his strength to appoint people he trusts who have a good track record?
And I think that's where a lot of analysis is going to be in the coming days. After he announces this, they're going to say something about what his power is within the ANC in order to actually carry out the reforms.
Because there has been horse trading probably.
Absolutely. So this is a big test, of course, to indicate how much he'll be able to do, because obviously however much he can actually bring into cabinet, his hand in being able to choose his cabinet also indicates how he's able to actually direct transformation, direct reform going forward, because of course he needs to be able to govern with the rest of the party, and how he works with that party is going to be quite important.
All right, we appreciate your pre-analysis. All will be revealed at 8 o'clock tonight across our channels. Thank you for being with us. Nanti Pai, economist with Nascent Advisory and Research. On the line, we had Razia Khan, Chief Economist for Africa, Standard Chartered in London, and Owen Nkomo, Chief Investment Officer of Nkunzi Wealth Group. All right, so we will be watching the RAND. We know where it is now, and I'll look at that again for you after the cabinet announcement. Let's look at the overall picture on the markets today.